Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing a brand new review. And today I'm going to be reviewing Nickel Boys, which is part of our award season coverage. We're, of course, reviewing all of the films nominated for Best Picture, if they're not on the channel already. And this one is technically a 2025 release here in the UK. It was released in January the 3rd here. It was shown basically nowhere, and it already exited cinemas, as that always happens. It's a weird way to do an intro for a film such as this. A very good film, which I'll be talking about in a lot more detail. But I've had a lot of issues with the UK distribution of the Best Picture nominees this year. Actually, not just Best Picture nominees, throughout many of the award season type films. It's been very poor coverage overall. Certainly from the big chains, questionable one as such, who are in bankruptcy through their own doing, and just continuously showing the same 6-7 films on loop, and they're probably going to moan that no one's going to them, yet they're not showing the films when they're being released here. So that's a rant for a different conversation. I spoke about it with Tate yesterday, but I am here. I'm going to be reviewing Nickel Boys. And of course, it's directed by Rommel Ross, and it is an adaptation of Colson Whitehead's novel. A novel I didn't know much about until the last couple of months, and a film I really didn't hear about until actually it came out here in the UK. I hadn't seen anything about it. I think I'd seen that it was on Barack Obama's, he always does his favourite films of the year list. I think I saw it on there. It's the first I'd heard of it. And there was a lot of momentum with it heading into the Oscar nominations. A lot of very excited people at the nominations it picked up. And it's probably, of the 10, the most curious film of my list to see because, again, poor release date here. It's not necessarily well-known actors or directors. It's very much up-and-comers, which is really interesting. And I'm going to say it probably is one of the most daring films of award season. That's mainly going to be spoken about maybe later, the cinematography, a topic that I think is make or break for many people. But before I really get into things, I do want to hear from people at home. So if you have seen Nickel Boys, please comment with your thoughts. I'm genuinely really intrigued to know what you think of this. I know people that love this film. I know people that like the story, but it didn't work for them from a technical perspective. I know people that haven't enjoyed it as such. It's been quite interesting, to read different opinions on this one, because I said it's doing something quite daring and probably one of the most interesting camera perspectives I've seen in a long time. I don't want to use the word gimmick. Some films do gimmick type things with the cameras, but this was a really intuitive storytelling method. And again, it's going to be make or break for a lot of different people. So I really do want to know what people are thinking. If you're new to the channel, if you've just checked out a couple of our videos and you've seen this, then if you want to follow us, find out what other videos else we sort of work on, you can get us on our social medias. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky. We have links to all of those in our Linktree description, linktree.com/cinemasavvy. You can see all that in the description below, alongside our award season coverage, because we aren't just doing reviews for the Best Picture nominees. We're doing live streams on wrap-ups of certain ceremonies. We've spoken about the Oscar nominations when they came out. We'll be doing predictions. We'll be doing a BAFTA wrap-up. Of course, there's going to be a few other themed videos. So it's a really excited time. It's that time of the year. It's busy. It's not necessarily the big blockbusters at the moment. That being said, Captain America Brave New World comes out next week here in the UK, so there will be a Marvel review. But yes, it's time to talk Nickel Boys. And as I said, I knew next to nothing about this heading into it, so I was really intrigued. And I want to talk about the environment watching this film too. It's got a sort of 2-hour, 20-minute runtime. It is a film that is quite, I don't want to say tough to watch. It's certainly not Oscar bait, but there are certain dramas which you know are going to be heavy hitting with respect to their themes. And I'm sat here as a white English person talking about racial stereotypes in America. That's a central theme of this and many other films. So people may want to dismiss that, but I always find these films quite eye-opening from a storytelling perspective, because the thing that surprised me most, and I've got to talk about this is a compliment to probably, I guess, the book, which obviously I've not read, but certainly the film and what's presented on screen. I was shocked to find out that this was actually a fictional story. And I thought it was an incredible piece of storytelling. And the reason I say it is I was shocked that it was not real as such. I know there were elements like the Nickel Academy that were pulled from very much real life tragedies, the awful acts that committed by America in that sort of Jim Crow era in the 50s, 60s, obviously for centuries beforehand. But to witness something such as this, and not like, oh, find out it's not real. It felt so authentic as a story, as the way it was shot, the tiny, minute bits of detail, the historical significance going on at the same time. I was really surprised. And I mean that in a great way as well, because obviously so many dramas, particularly this time of year with Oscar season, they very much are, biopics, or we're adapting this historical book, or we're inspired by this. It's great to see an original, obviously it's not an original screenplay, it's adapted screenplay, but an original story telling something so different. And I don't want to talk the boy in the striped pajamas. That's a really weird tangent to go on to, but that's been very much that face of the fictional historical story that could be real. Now, granted, that's for like young adults, for kids, that's taught at schools. I know that's not come down well in recent years, and there's a lot of problematic problems with that book. But I don't ever think there was like a nasty intent with that ever being made, incomparable to this. But going into that, if this had been real type mentality, it's again putting those fictional stories in those very real life contextual settings. And this film does this so well, and was being taken through the life of Elwood, and the character played by Ethan Herisse, again an actor I've not seen. Brandon Wilson's in this, playing the character of Turner, again an actor I've not seen anything. Very much an unknown cast. And it leaves quite an impact, saying that up front. And I know I'm going to talk about the Oscar nominations towards the end, but I just want to say the idea for a story that you are with this character from and I'm going to keep this spoiler free, but you're with a character from a very young age. You get to see them grow up, go to this institution, and then we get a dual narrative structure with a character in their later life. And getting the time jump, and it makes me feel old, but now we're in the 90s, and then it cuts again, like I think we're meant to be in the 10s or the 20s. There's a really interesting linear structure that goes on with this film that you have to give credit to Romero Ross for the direction for choosing, so that he co-wrote the screenplay as well. It's been nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. I loved the structure, and in line with that structure, the editing that came with it. That's not been nominated, but when they're jumping between different time points, and it reminded me a bit of Oppenheimer in a very complimentary way. That in Oppenheimer, when they're breaking up how would you say, like, here's a scene of like young Oppenheimer, now we'll put in the sort of the atoms and the molecules and this big loud moment, not necessarily time jump, but to show this is how the brain is thinking, this is where he's going. It does that in a really interesting way, with a very unsettling score at times, with a very interesting score, or it's edited in such a unique way. I would be very surprised. Not surprised. I'd very much like to see this on a second viewing, if I'm completely honest, because from a technical perspective, I thought this was a great film. From a storytelling perspective, I thought it was a great film. A very harrowing film and difficult to watch at times. And the credit in calling this difficult to watch has to go to the ingenuity for the cinematography. Now, I mentioned at the start of this review that this is going to be something that's going to be make or break for a lot of people. Its cinematographer is Jomo Frey, again, another up-and-coming cinematographer, somebody I haven't seen any work from before when I checked before recording, but the whole film is done in point of view. But it's not a GoPro strapped on someone's head. Of course, it's someone's point of view, two characters' points of view at times, and we get to see it from an early age, but this felt different to the times when we can call it a gimmick. I think of that Sholto Copley action film, when it was like, we just strapped a GoPro and let them have fun, done. You see videos on Instagram, like people strapping GoPros, their dogs running around, fine. But this actually, and this is going to be very, what's the word, snobby within the film industry, but it actually felt like it was a real film, that I was actually there with these characters in these circumstances. And the reason for that isn't just having a camera sort of high up on someone's head to just look around a room like you're on VR. It felt real, that the everyday person, maybe they are going to be looking down when they're talking. They're going to be not doing Ange Postecoglou, but they're just sat there looking down, they're eating, they're taking their mind off it whilst they're talking to people like this. But at the same time, you might have other glances looking elsewhere, trying to figure out what's going on. The use of breath, the sound in this was edited amazing as well. It's a really interesting concept, and I can understand why it doesn't work for so many people, but for me, I thought it added an element to a historical drama such as this, where we are following these two young, I can't call them kids, I know they're sort of in their teens at this point, but we are following their life, their perspective, what they're doing, how they are planning to live their life, and then in later life, it ends up being sort of directly, not point of view, but the back of a character's head for the later scene, so you can really get that divide of when you're watching somebody else, or when they're watching TV, we get the full screen image of the TV. They're not just staring at TV with something on. So The cinematography I thought was a marvel in this. That was very powerful. The scenes where it really does go into some of the horrible circumstances to which these young boys are being murdered, they're being tortured, they're being punished. The use of the camera, and there's a scene I'll talk about. It's the first time you get a sequence that has it where Elwood's just sort of sat in a waiting room, and you can hear the belt being whipped against people. You can hear the screaming, the lights, the generators. The fact you're just there in a room and you can hear his character like breathing a bit more, and you can start to feel afraid for him. And in complementary manner, it came across like a video game, and that's not a disrespect to video games. That's a I am so engrossed in the story. I'm so engrossed in this character. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm afraid. It felt like I am on that PlayStation. I am with somebody, and I think that's where the film succeeds with that for me. That if I didn't feel anything, if I felt, oh, this is a gimmick, I'd rather have my camera placed elsewhere in the room. Look at Zone of Interest last year, right? It's a camera essentially planted on the ground like the Big Brother house. There's cameras everywhere, but not close-ups, and that worked for what that film was doing, for what that story was. This was another level, and I've just got to praise the film. It instantly makes the film memorable. On top of having a great story, but they're not just two interesting lead characters. You've got the character of Griff, who's going to be memorable for some. That you're introduced to all these young people, and I kind of want to compare it to Holes. I don't know if anyone watching like had thought of that, but it felt like, hey, we're off with these people. We're at like a sort of prison type thing for young offenders or whatever, and we're there with them on their day to day and what they're going through. And it's a really weird comparison to that, but it's again how I felt like watching it. But this film was able to do it so differently, and certainly from a structural perspective, that the film is echoing real life history. You've got, Martin Luther King speeches being shown on TV with them watching him. And at the same time, you've got the space race ongoing, which was obviously a humongous part of the 60s. But the juxtaposition of those is whilst America is watching the screens, watching the rockets, we're seeing the terrible things the country's also doing to, in the case of Elwood, innocent people. He was the wrong person in the wrong car at the wrong time. And it ends up costing him an education, which the film does a great thing of setting up to begin with. That we've got this young kid that's been taught to think for himself. He's very intelligent. He's going off to college. He takes a lift off someone, and then he's immediately put into prison, and it's all his fault. And you think of the guilt that comes with that in the storytelling perspectives, that the whole film is centered on a mistake that was nobody's fault. Somebody offered him a lift and wanted to do something nice. And I think it leaves harrowing. And it's a film I've been thinking about for a few days since seeing it. And where I'm kind of going with this review is I'm, of course, recommending this for people at home. I felt like I'm not touched base on a story. I do want to say, if you haven't seen it, the less you know, maybe the more engrossing is it, because I knew nothing. If you read the novel, I'd be curious to know if it differs, if they change things. Has it got the same structure of we've got a present day, we've got a past tense of when they're younger? Does it do that juxtaposition of those storytelling elements? I don't know. But what I do know from the film is that it was an incredible film. And I'm very happy it was nominated for Best Picture if I'm talking about the award stuff too. I know there are a lot of people that spoke about it when it came out. As I said, it had an abysmal release here in the UK, not being shown by the chains. And when the chains continue to buy and buy and buy, yet they don't show these things, and when the independent cinemas are closing down more and more, it makes it incredibly frustrating to be able to support films such as this. And that is on the distribution's fault. Granted, it's not always their fault. There might be chains as well, but whether it's the chain, whether it's distributor, I don't know who's at fault, but it's really not a good look, and it's frustrating. It's every year we have the same issues here in the UK. Now, this isn't nominated for any BAFTAs, but this does have 2 Oscar nominations, as I mentioned, Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Film. I doubt it would win either. It's not just about winning, and this is the beauty of awards season, that the attention that's drawn to a film for being nominated, for me, that gives a different perspective to a film that isn't nominated. If this film wasn't nominated, I might never see it or never have seen it. I couldn't ever answer that question, but I know because it is, I'm watching it now ahead of the Oscars. And when we go into that night, when we're honouring the best films of the year, this is a film I'll be thinking about. And granted, in the UK here, it's a 2025 release date. I'll be maybe thinking about this as the year goes on, when I keep seeing other films to compare it to. Where will it, I spoke about the Ironswell last year. It got absolutely massacred in the UK with its release. It's the second favourite film of the year for 2024. And I think Nickel Boys is going to leave a really mighty impression. And I think it's a film which is very much worth seeking out if you haven't seen it already. That's the best I can say with that. It was a really eye-opening piece of filmmaking. and I'm excited to see what else Roman Ross can do. I want to go see some more of his films. The same with Ethan Herisse, who's great in that leading role. Brendan Wilson, as I mentioned, it's an unbelievable film from an up and coming director with an up and coming cast and crew. I'm very curious to know what they do next, and this will be something I follow as time goes by. So that's going to do it for my review of Nickel Boys. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've seen Nickel Boys, as I said, I really would do want to know your thoughts, because I know it's not going to work for everybody. And as I said, I think the cinematography is some of the ballsiest stuff I've ever seen. Very, very powerful, especially that montage at the end. Now, you might be wondering what else to be doing with award season. Well, I'm meant to be doing a review every Sunday and Thursday with the Royal Rumble this Sunday, so we did a special, so I'm dropping this one today on Tuesday. My cinema's finally showing the Brutalist on Friday, so I'll be able to watch that 3 weeks after it comes out. Great distribution there. So that will be Sunday's one, probably. I don't know what's happening on Thursday. I need to see Emilia Perez, unfortunately. I need to see Emilia Perez. We've got a few more films to review. We'll get there. We're just under a month away from the Oscars now. As I said, there'll be a few of the videos. If you're a fan of award season, do consider checking it out for us. There's a playlist on our channel. If you go onto the homepage, you'll see it. If you scroll down a little bit, I'll have a 2025 award season playlist. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.